Greetings, everyone. Hope you're having a good summer. We have fantastic days here, and it's all about getting out as often as you can. So, I hope you're enjoying the time. So, for this video, I want to go on a viral topic. I'm just joking. It's about old books. So, it's a thing that people don't really do that much these days, read, and barely like get to the old books. So I have an interest which is to read old Swedish. So there's a newspaper archive where we can get newspapers from like the 17th century. I've read books from that period also. Some of which I've posted on here on the channel. But it's a long between when I get to do that. I'm not part of any kind of club nor academic group, so it's a personal pursuit. I just enjoy reading old Swedish. And yeah, so um, during a lovely spring day, I was just strolling around in Gothenburg City, enjoying you know, the vibes and feeling at peace, and visited an antique bookstore. And it's pretty interesting because it's like a small shop, but there's one small kind of narrow door without the door that leads into the back room. I mean, in the back room, there's like a labyrinth of bookshelves and things. So I had to look around and enjoy myself and asked for adventure books or travel books. So he showed me where it was, and it was all the way on the inside in the labyrinth. Um, and there I found a book called On Horseback to Russia by Valdemar Langlet. So, first of all, why I'm not doing this video in Swedish? Because this video isn't about the book nor the content. It's pretty interesting and I'll mention it. But the point here is to, for those people who are still curious about getting a different perspective on things, when you read old books, of course you're going to get exposed to propaganda and lies and misconceptions, but you're also going to get this really genuine kind of individual observations that are still intact. So this book is was published in 1898, so almost 130 years ago. It's not that old when I say old books, but it's still a bit older Swedish, and a bit of a personal touch in the writing, which is another interesting thing where, today everybody's writing the same way and using AI to help them write. So everything reads the same. But back in the days, people had their own kind of style. And before, the 19th century, before school, the language wasn't really standardized in places. So people used words and bent the words in a bit different way, depending on their choice and region in which they lived in. Back in the days, there were certain times where you had to have passport to travel within a country. I used to talk about this back during the pandemic days when the world was shut down. But to get back to the book, so in this book, this peculiar Swede, who has an interesting history, but I won't go into his biography. He wanted to explore and experience Russia on horse, and he had already been in Russia, like to certain places. He was already in touch with Tolstoy, so he wanted to do like kind of maybe a more original version of what people do today when they go to a certain country and they try some indigenous type of thing. Um, and the book was pretty amazing because when he departs from Stockholm, there was a fair in Stockholm. So he describes the fair and looking at it while, taking the boat, not the boat, the ship, of course, to St. Petersburg. And throughout the book, from Stockholm to St. Petersburg, from St. Petersburg to some other place by train, there's all of these stops and observations, and peculiar differences between people, manners, status. And remember, this was in the time before the Russian Revolution, before World War One. So this is a very interesting time, like the last decades of the tsardom in Russia. So and you also get pretty like the book begins the travels begins with the visit to Tolstoy family, and it also ends by revisiting Tolstoy and his house and place when he is on his way back to Sweden. So he ends up getting deep in with the Cossack lifestyle. Um, he lives with them. He eats with them. Dresses like them. He becomes one of them, and it's a very interesting story how he describes their customs and manner, how he adapts to it, and also how he earns their trust, basically, being this foreigner. And this was a time where this region he was in, they didn't get any newspapers or information about Sweden. So people have had a very strange concept about the rest of the world, and also naturally pretty suspicious, but also pretty down to earth and kind of humble. Like people were more prone to help pilgrims, wanderers, help them over the night and give them food and shelter. So these kind of books are interesting because people today, some people have this very over romanticized uh, image or very gloomy image of the past. But the more you read these historical books, you realize it's pretty much the same. It's just that our capabilities, technology, our patterns, our lifestyle changes, but the human behavior, intention, and it's still the same. So that's one of the conclusions from reading many books like this. Um, and as I said, like I don't get time to delve into these books because they are not often like excitingly well written or something like that, but the pure content in them is really interesting. So you might be from a country, you probably have some old book somewhere. And this book, by the way, is available on archive. So I'll put a link to that place for any Swede who passes by and just wants to read or skim through. You can also have a look at the photographs because he was traveling with a camera, and this is the late 19th century, and having a camera, people were very it's an interesting description when how people react to the camera, and first time in their life somebody tells them to keep a pose and stand still and take an image. But also like I'm the kind of person who likes mountains and dynamic landscapes, but where he stayed it was the plains, the Cossack territories. So it was pretty different, and the way he describes it, and the strangers, the oddities, the personality traits from the people he lived with and encountered during these trips are pretty amazing. But it's the same as when you travel today, but it's a different setting. Because why I really enjoy reading these books, because the world was different back then. People dressed differently. As I said, even if you go further back in time, people within the same kind of kingdom or country wrote a bit differently, had different customs. So yeah, it's not a viral interest like I don't. It's a very niched thing, but for me to read these stories is pretty interesting. And most of the time, when I do it, it's online through some passages, some documents. So not always books, but there's something special with the book, because a book is a concrete thing you hold, you buy, and they they last for quite a while, and there's something special about them because they are getting, how do you say, certain books are not reprinted basically. So certain stories and descriptions about the world are disappearing. Of course, there might be some PDF or text version on, like, for instance, this book on archive, but even that is pretty, narrow and hard to find. But uh, so in this day and age where people are really like just using their thumb scrolling and getting these instant stories, instant opinions. Opinions are emotional. Everybody can have an opinion. As I said, some people have these amazing romanticized ideas about how people lived, how their faith was, how their religion was practiced, how their communities were structured, and they have this idea that was so much more, in tune with something compared to today. Others have the opposite, but it's always more or less the same as today. Just the clothing, the surroundings are a bit different. So you get access to this by reading books, by studying, by learning how things actually were. And there are certain time periods which are interesting. As I said, this what caught my interest with this was that it was the time before World War I, and yeah, the Russian Revolution. So it was kind of the last days of the empire, of the tsardom. And there are elements of that in the book. Tolstoy had certain opinions. He mentions some other ideas that were flinging around at the time, and there are even more narrow kind of ideas that were mentioned in the book, that are pretty peculiar and feel totally fresh to this day. I know a bit about Russian history, and what's peculiar is that Sweden and Russia were never allies in anything. So if you look at the time frame of some 100 years, you can see that countries were on the same side, have had some joint interest. Sweden and Russia never had it. So it's a pretty interesting observation to see in the book, like somewhere deep in a region that's think south of Moscow, north of Ukraine. There was a Swedish student group visiting already back in these days, like 1896, 7. The book was published in 98. So yeah, so there were like people were connecting and traveling and observing and taking inspiration from one another. Even in these far off villages, there was somebody who knew somebody who had sailed to the other side, meaning to Sweden, beyond the kingdom, tsardom of Russia, and so on. So this is pretty amusing to read. Also, the imaginative part reading these books is something I enjoy, because there is no video nor image. It's just a text, and it's a time far gone, with people who are long gone dead. So you have to conjure up your imagination. You have to find the references from the history you read. Sometimes a place is mentioned or something, and you can kind of look it up and see what it's all about, and you form this map of events and happenings while reading these travel observations. Somebody's ringing, guys. This is my quiet time at home. Thank you for tuning in. Enjoy books, people. All the best.